Greetings, System Failure listeners. Nate here with your weekly essay read, this one entitled Demeter and the Medici, and subtitled A Challenge from the Magical Bankers of Florence. During the Middle Ages, the Roman Catholic Church condemned as heretics those who promulgated the idea that reality is not merely observed by the mind, but is also a product of the mind. This idea will serve as a simplified definition of magic for the purposes of this essay. The church insisted that creation is the sole domain of God, and backed this insistence with brutal violence. In so doing, Christianity underwent an evolution from being politically repressed to engaging in political repression, making it just as ripe for a challenge at the end of the Middle Ages as the Roman authorities had been during the fall of Rome. This career of the church vividly illustrates how inconvenient the magical insight is to structures of temporal power. Demeter. Magic is the notion that we are not mere observers of reality, but also creators of it. When we sleep, our brains simultaneously create and experience environments that seem every bit as real to us as our waking lives do. The magical view is that real life is just like a dreamscape, in that the act of observation is also an act of creation. Some of the oldest suspicions about reality come from the ancient Greek mystery schools, which sometimes involve psychedelic drugs. The most famous of these mystery schools was Eleusis, where, for 1,000 years, the motherly grain goddess Demeter was worshipped by initiates drinking a beer-like substance. Recent archaeobotanical evidence supports a long-standing hypothesis that psychoactive ergot was used in the rites of Demeter. Psychedelic substances seem to perturb reality, just as a stone dropped into a pond perturbs the reflection on its surface. That explains why initiates into these mystery schools often came away with the impression that reality is, in fact, a product of the mind. Some called this insight being saved. The Greek philosopher Plato, likely an initiate into multiple mystery schools, wrote about reality as if it were an illusion, like shadows on the wall of his famous cave. Christianity. Plato's idea that reality is an illusion, like shadows flickering on a wall, suggests that objects outside of space and time are casting the shadows, what he calls the realm of ideals. His allegory of the cave described an ascent out of our transient, imperfect world of illusion upward into an eternal realm of perfection. The concept of an ascent between parallel realms became the idea of an ascent into heaven in the Christian faith, which emerged as a response to the cruel economic hierarchy of the Roman Empire. Early Christians condemned the rich in the harshest possible terms and insisted on the debt forgiveness commanded by the Hebrew Bible. This put them at odds with the wealthy Roman oligarchy, leading to their brutal persecution. However, Christianity's economic populism made it highly attractive in the late Roman Empire, an era marked by extreme wealth disparity. Additionally, the stunning decline of Roman civilization during that era made Christian prophecies of doom appear to be coming true before everyone's eyes. The new faith gained so much popularity that even the Roman emperors converted to it. The Roman oligarchy officially sanctioned Augustine's interpretation of Christianity, in which forgiveness was needed not for debts, but for personal moral failings. The debt forgiveness originally proclaimed by Christianity would have canceled debts owed by the poor to the oligarchy. Naturally, the oligarchy preferred Augustine's alternative idea of forgiveness that wouldn't cost them any money. Similarly, the magical intuition that reality is a product of the mind was also inconvenient for political authorities, because the corollary, that the mind can therefore alter reality, threatens their control. For these reasons, the version of Christianity that became the state religion of the Roman Empire was fundamentally different than the version that had once emerged as an underground movement. Christianity was shorn of both the economic populism of its Hebrew roots and the magical insight of its Greek heritage. The Medici. Early Christians challenged the absolute power of the Roman oligarchy. 1,000 years later, the Medici of Florence similarly challenged the absolute political power of the Roman Catholic Church by reintroducing Europe to pre-Christian pagan ideas. The church enjoyed an intellectual monopoly in medieval Europe. The magical notion that we are not mere observers of reality, but also creators of it, threatened the supreme political power of the church. That's why church officials insisted that creation was solely the domain of God. Those who dared to suggest otherwise were condemned as heretics. The dungeons of the Inquisition and the fires of the witch trials awaited people caught practicing magic. At the end of the medieval period, however, the Medici banking family amassed a large enough fortune to challenge the authority of the Pope. Their challenge took the form of a concerted effort to return to the pre-Christian art and literature of Greco-Roman antiquity. The Medici patronized the artists who created the great works of the Italian Renaissance, and their agents scoured the Mediterranean basin for old pagan manuscripts to be translated and preserved. After being lost to Christendom during the fall of Rome, the works of Plato were reintroduced to European society by Marsilio Ficino, the Medici family's Greek translator. However, when Medici agents discovered a crumbling copy of the Corpus Hermeticum, the patriarch of the old Medici clan ordered Ficino to halt his translation of Plato and focus exclusively on passages like the following. If then you do not make yourself equal to God, you cannot apprehend God, for like is known by like. Leap clear of all that is corporeal, and make yourself grown to a like expanse with that greatness which is beyond all measure. Rise above time and become eternal. Then you will apprehend God. This quote clearly illustrates the heretical nature of the Corpus Hermeticum, an old book of pagan magic dating back to the late Roman Empire. It blatantly invites the reader to aspire to become like God. Like Christianity, Hermeticism was also influenced by the Platonic idea of a mythic ascent between parallel realms, as clearly described in this passage. Palazzo Pitti. During the Middle Ages, Hermeticism became the spiritual framework for the magical art of alchemy. Alchemy suggested that the mythic ascent was to be achieved through technical improvement rather than the Augustinian moral improvement emphasized by Christianity. This idea became the magnum opus, or the great work of the alchemist, and is reflected in the great artwork of the Italian Renaissance. The Medici of Florence were obsessed with alchemy. They kept collections of unusual alchemical artifacts, such as narwhal tusks and hairballs. They ground up gemstones and consumed the dust, hoping to benefit from magical properties. The Medici also commissioned artwork featuring alchemical symbols, such as the Ouroboros, the snake that eats its own tail. The Ouroboros can still be seen today in some of the Medici commissioned artwork hanging in the Palazzo Vecchio, the old town hall of Florence. Among the most imposing addresses in Florence is Palazzo Pitti, which was the grand ducal palace of the Medici. Here, the Medici hid their boldest alchemical symbol, a hedge maze that allegorizes the alchemical journey. The idea behind the alchemical journey is that the mythic ascent itself is the destination. Brazilian author Paulo Coelho illustrated the concept in his 1988 novel, The Alchemist, in which a young man seeks treasure beneath the great pyramids of Egypt, only to eventually discover that treasure in the village where his quest began. Similarly, the Medici commissioned a hedge maze with both a direct route from beginning to end and the option to take a long, circuitous route. The Medici used this hedge maze to test the fluency of visitors to Palazzo Pitti in the heretical ideas of alchemy. To mark the beginning and the end of the labyrinth, the Medici placed statues of the old grain goddess Demeter, the central figure in the Eleusinian mysteries. The title card for this essay features a photo taken by the author of the statue of Demeter that marks the end of the alchemical journey at Palazzo Pitti. Conclusion. The magical insight that reality is not merely observed by the mind, but is also a product of the mind, is universally inconvenient for political authorities. They want us to believe unquestioningly in a rock-solid reality that they control. The historical trajectory of Christianity vividly illustrates this point. It evolved from a scrappy rebellion against political authority in the late Roman Empire to becoming the political authority itself during the late Middle Ages. Just as it featured a shift away from economic populism, this evolution involved a doctrinal shift away from magical thinking, making Christianity more acceptable to power. Well, folks, that's it for this week's audio essay. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, I want to invite you to log on to systemfailure.org. There you can enter in your email to receive the text versions of these essays every week in your email inbox. The text versions of these essays include the title card mentioned in the essay. It'll allow you to see a picture of the statue of Demeter that was referred therein. And finally, folks, if you'd like to get in touch with either Brian or myself, you can accomplish that over at systemfailure.org by clicking on the About page. All right, well, I'll be back on Monday with another regularly scheduled edition of the System Failure Podcast with Brian. I'll talk to you all then. Hope you are having a great week.